episode of Progress, Potential, and Possibilities, discussions with fascinating people designing a better tomorrow for all of us. I'm your host, Ira Pastor.
Welcome, everybody, again to another episode of our show, bringing you another really fascinating guest today who is helping to create a better tomorrow for all of us. As a little background to today's show, as many people are aware, there have been a variety of folks out there in recent years, people with names like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Richard Branson that have been doing really cool things with rocket ships and rocket planes and so forth, aiming to get us up into low Earth orbits and back to the moon and eventually one day to Mars. But our guest today is a really amazing thought leader who is working on research which ultimately aims to get us much farther at speeds many orders of magnitude beyond where current technologies can take us. We have the honor of being joined by Dr. Harold Sonny White, Director of Advanced Research and Development at the Limitless Space Institute, located in Houston, Texas. Dr. White has over 25 years of experience working in the aerospace industry with Boeing, Lockheed Martin, as well as NASA. And his current role at the Limitless Space Institute, he leads all R&D work and established priorities for investigation and expenditures for their research programs. Dr. White obtains grants and other resources to support their R&D efforts, markets the Limitless Space Institute to major benefactors to increase their resources and the related R&D efforts, and ultimately arranges and conducts events, ensuring that appropriately related well-known individuals involved with the programs. Dr. White holds his Ph.D. in physics from Rice University, master's in mechanical engineering from Wichita State University, bachelor's mechanical engineering, University of South Alabama. And Dr. White has been recognized many times over the span of his career for not just an excellent work ethic, exceptional technical skills, but his ability as a project manager and dedicated ultimately to the pursuit of human spaceflight. He was awarded the NASA Medal for Excellence in Achievement by the administrator for his role in getting the thermal protection system, robotic inspection tools built, delivered, and certified to support the STS-114 Space Shuttle mission. He was awarded the Silver Snoopy Award by the Crew Office for his actions in discovery and disposition of critical damage to the robotic arm prior to STS-121, and received the NASA Spaceflight Awareness Honoree Award, STS-122 mission, one of the highest and most prestigious awards available to employees of NASA. He was also awarded the NASA Exceptional Engineer Achievement Medal for his role in exploring and incorporating advanced power and propulsion concepts into human spaceflight architectures. A lot of really interesting things we're going to be talking about, but Sonny White, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show today.
Hey, Ira, yeah, thanks for asking me to be on your show. It's always a treat to get a chance to talk with folks about some of the stuff that we're trying to pursue and champion here at Limitless Space Institute. So, thank you for being a communicator that tries to help engage with more people on some of these interesting topics. I think you cover a broad array of things, right? So I imagine you find yourself having to be an expert on lots of different stuff, depending upon whether it's a Monday or a Wednesday or a Friday and who you're talking to.
I try my best, and one of the things I always look for on the show, and not just the cutting edge, but really the bleeding edge, and the people like yourself that are willing to take these risks in 2022 for things that I don't know if they're going to happen in 2052 or 2082 or when things are going to be happening, but people that are really willing to take these risks today and say, this is the research that we have to do. And obviously, you're right at the top of that list. So I'm so glad, Sonny, that to have you here. Before we get into everything you're doing and the company and all the research, take a little time, if you would, just to talk about yourself. I mean, I read a bio and obviously all the awards and cool stuff you're doing. Where did you grow up? What was your childhood like? Were you always interested in space and the frontiers? Star Trek fan, Star Wars fan? Take us to the beginning.
Yeah, what's the people aspect of things, right? Exactly. My dad was in the military, so I've lived all over the U.S. But I spent a large portion of my young life in and around Washington, D.C. Grew up in Loudoun County, Virginia, if you will. And spent a lot of time going to the National Air and Space Smithsonian in DC, right there on the mall. This is before I think Udvar Hazy was actually there. This is back in the mid to late 80s. So I got plenty of opportunity to go to this beautiful museum that had all these amazing examples and illustrations of people accomplishing amazing things and overcoming all kinds of obstacles. And you know, it's not interesting just from the standpoint, you know, you're looking at the X-15 or you're looking at the lunar module that landed on the surface of the moon, or some of the capsules that went to space. It's when you read into the people that were involved with these things in terms of working together and some of the things they had to do. I mean, that really, to me, it was that aspect as well that really helped me connect in terms of a love and appreciation for kind of pushing the boundaries of knowledge in this specific way and in this specific area. So I think that set the bit for me very early on. And I was always going to have a healthy interest in things that fly and try and defy gravity and go to other planets. And certainly, you know, TV shows and movies, those all influenced me just like they did anybody else. And I personally remember growing up, not when they were first aired, but in syndication, the Star Trek TV show. I remember growing up with that, and I think the Next Generation was towards early part of my college days. So I think those always colored my thoughts in terms of what might be possible and give a little bit of a hopeful vision for what a future could be at some point in time. So you know, I always had a healthy love for technology and engineering. Even independent of that, I was, much to my parents' chagrin, always disassembling stuff. Not always successful at reassembling it, but you know, that's part of, I guess, the discovery process of trying to explore things in your world around you. So I think I've always known I was going to be an engineer, but also had a very healthy interest in science. And so, you know, when you were going through the educational experience, I started off in engineering and then later on switched over to physics. So I have a master's in mechanical engineering and a Ph.D. in physics, right? So I have a love for both engineering and physics. And so to me, science is also extremely interesting in understanding how does our star work? How was our solar system formed? General relativity, plasma physics, all those things are just fascinating to me. So yeah, I think that's kind of a quick synopsis of what makes me tick, right? So
absolutely, no, absolutely, and you know, as we were chatting offline a bit, and you know, doing, you know, reading into Limitless Space Institute, you know, I saw a lot of parallels. You know, as you know, I come out of the pharmaceutical industry, and a lot of what we've worked on in the past, whether they're, you know, small molecule drugs or protein therapeutics or whatever, they got a long time before they ever get to the market, and they start with an idea, and they may work and they may not, but you got to work on them. And I saw, you know, a lot of similar parallels, even more so in what you're doing. Talk just a little bit before we get into sort of the science of warp bubbles and some of the really futuristic concepts. Just walk us through a little bit about the history of the Limitless Space Institute, when it was set up, who initially sort of funded it. And you know, I was looking at, you know, for instance, your advisory board, you got people like Pete Worden from the Breakthrough Prize, you got Anusa Ansari, X Prize, Clint Crozier, who used to be at Space Force, a nice who's who of space tech involved with your group. Talk to you what that was like, also setting all of that up, and how you brought all these great minds together.
Yeah, that's a great question, Ira. Yeah, thank you for that. So Limitless Space Institute is a 501c3. We're a nonprofit. We were kind of, you know, gavelled that by the IRS in 2020. I joined Limitless Space Institute in 2019, the very tail end of 2019. Brian B.K. Kelly had contacted me while I was still at NASA and asked me, he wanted to chat with me about some opportunities that he had. And so came over and we talked about, at the time, the seedling formation of Limitless Space Institute. And Brian B.K. Kelly is our president. He worked for NASA for a very, very long time. He was the head of the Flight Operations Directorate. So he picked the astronauts and the crews and went to space. A very amazing human being, accomplished an enormous amount of incredible things with his long and storied career at NASA. Our benefactor is Cam Gafarian. He is a co-founder of a number of other for-profit commercial companies. You might have heard of some of those. Axiom Space is one that's working on a commercial space station.
Yep.
Intuitive Machines is working on the commercial cargo lunar lander. X Energy is a nuclear reactor company, and he has a number of other things that he's interested in. He's very much a kind of a Renaissance guy, very interested in trying to champion the technologies and ideas that help make for a better world for us for today and tomorrow and so forth. So it was after a lot of thought and prayer, it seemed like a really great opportunity to lean into something that I've always been passionate about. As we were talking about my interest in space, I'm very, very interested in power and propulsion. A lot of my career at NASA has been has revolved very, very closely around that particular topic. And so the Limitless Space Institute, in the process of kind of thinking about who and what Limitless Space Institute is, our mission statement, I think, really distills it down to a coffee cup worthy type of statement. Our mission is to inspire and educate the next generation to travel beyond our solar system and to support and develop, support the research and development of enabling technologies, right? And so that is a very challenging mission in terms of inspire and educate the next generation to travel beyond our solar system. I mean, think about that for a second. When we think about space exploration today, right, we are working to put human beings back on the surface of the moon in the next few years. We have a rover that's sitting on the surface of Mars with a little a drone that's keeping it company. And those are amazing accomplishments. And that's typically what might come to people's minds when they think about space exploration. But if you talk about sending a human being to the outer solar system or further, if you wanted to send human beings to, say, Saturn in 200 days, the amount of energy that's necessary to make something like that possible is an order of magnitude more energy than it takes to get a payload from the surface of the Earth to low Earth orbit. So all that to say, chemical propulsion is not going to close that kind of objective. We have to try something different. We have to do something. So if chemical propulsion can't do it, then what do we do? Right? What's a potential solution? So a distillation of a fairly complicated topic into just a few major brushstrokes is the following. If you want to think about how we might try and tackle that, starting from what we know and then working to what we don't know. Within the context of what we know in terms of engineering and physics, we could use nuclear electric propulsion, where we would have a nuclear reactor that's fissioning uranium, providing power to some form of electric propulsion that's ionizing a gas. And this type of an architecture could send human beings to every destination in the solar system. And so that's well explored in literature, well understood. And that's something we could do today if we decided to. And that would give us the solar system, if you will. But that won't necessarily do a good job on interstellar. That still might take 1,000 years to do something like that. For interstellar, in maybe 100-year type of time frame or several decades at a minimum, we would turn to fusion propulsion. So kind of moving a little bit into the unknown on the engineering side. We still understand the physics. Fusion propulsion could potentially allow us to send a large payload to another star system in, say, 100 years. But what if we wanted to do an interstellar mission in a fraction of a human lifetime? That's kind of where we have to look to the frontiers of physics as well, right? So we've got general relativity and quantum mechanics kind of articulate what we know of the world from the microscopic to the macroscopic. But those two theories are not compatible. So we know that we have yet to develop some kind of a generalized understanding. And so in the process of exploring those frontiers, maybe we can find new ways of doing things. We know the idea of the space warp is mathematically possible, but what do we build to make it manifest and real? So in the process of working on the frontiers of physics, maybe we can help better understand what that might need to look like, right? So that kind of frames our view of the trade space. There's lots of different things one could talk about, but it's just a good way to highlight some of the major things to think about. And so Limitless Space Institute, how do we kind of map that mission and vision into action, if you will? We are a doing organization. We do research internally through EagleWorks. We're currently funded by DARPA Defense Science Office on some interesting things we'll talk about here in a minute. We also fund research externally. We stood up a program in the summer of 2020 called Interstellar Initiative Grants. We asked for proposals from all over the globe, and we picked 9 groups from different universities all over to fund things ranging from beamed energy propulsion, relativistic solar sails. We did 4 teams that are working on fusion propulsion. We did 2 that are working on space drives, and one that's working on traversable wormholes. In addition to that, we commissioned a summer class this past summer that we did in partnership with the Initiative for Interstellar Studies, a week-long class on interstellar engineering, physics topics, and so forth. We'll probably teach it again in 2022. We'll also be standing up some programs this next year in 2022. Limitless Space Institute fellowships. We'll also do scholarships and something we'll call lab boosters, where you might be able to fund some small things down at the high school level as well. So definitely a doing organization trying to, I guess, put rubber to the road in lots of different areas and continue to foster advocacy for this domain and feed the community, because there's a hungry community out there that wants to think about and work in this domain. And so we're trying to do our part to help move the ball down the field. So, and as you said, we're surrounded by a bunch of very bright and amazing people, both internally at LSI and then our advisory board and some of the amazing people that we have there. And we've got some good working partnerships with organizations, including breakthrough initiatives. We have formal engagements with over 20 different entities that we've put on contract, if you will, just in our brief 2 years worth of existence. And we have several more in work, and we'll continue to try and make a difference. So.
Excellent. And you mentioned amongst your funders or your partners is DARPA, and I've done episodes in the past with DARPA folks from there, and one of the interesting things I remember, actually, I had Dr. Jeff Ling on the show last year. He was the former head of the DARPA's Biologic Technology Office. And, he was sort of laying things out at the time in our discussion. He was like, you might go to a venture capitalist and they'll spend all this time doing due diligence and looking at a bunch of stuff that doesn't mean anything before they put money into you. And DARPA's model, the way he's come to say, the first thing we ask, is this cool? And if it is cool, we will find out how to get it funded and put really good minds on it, albeit for 5 years, and then they got to move on to something else. But is it cool? And I got to tell you, what you're doing is cool. And at all ends of the spectrum. And me being a biologic guy, I say that. Talk a little bit about. Obviously, I'm saying anything about your DARPA relationship, but the need for some of these new models, DARPA-like models that mimic what DARPA does in our exploration of the unknown in these cutting-edge areas, because a lot of traditional investors just don't touch this stuff. Right. Talk a little bit about how you see, specifically in space tech, or I don't know if I'm classifying this right as space tech or beyond space tech, but the importance of some of these unique funding innovation models for what you're trying to do.
Thank you for the narrative there, right? A lot of for-profit entities are going to focus any type of research and development that they conduct internally using internal resources on something that has a very low risk in terms of trying to result in a product that they could then maybe move forward with. And of course, the risk posture is also, dependent upon how much revenue something could potentially generate. So risk posture in medicine and pharmaceuticals, for example, your area, there's lots of stuff that gets done that doesn't necessarily pan out. But a handful of things that pan out, they can bring in a lot of revenue, if you will. Right. So risk posture in one industry might be different from another. Sure. And so aerospace tends to be very calculated on risk. And so resources that get put into kind of that seed corn kind of research, if you will, sprinkling the initial seeds and trying to water it and see if you can get it to grow up. The for-profit entities tend to be very reserved on what they can do and what they're willing to do. And I understand that, right? That's just, a function of the industry. But municipal organizations have a little bit more flexibility, right? And so even, NASA has something called NIAC that they use to fund very low TRL stuff. But even that kind of has a threshold that it's very mindful of as well, number one. Number two, NIAC's also a very broad category. They fund anything from all different disciplines, right? We're very focused on the power and propulsion regime. Now, the interesting thing about DARPA, right? DARPA has through the Defense Science Office, they can fund basic research, right? They can go all the way down to, hey, we just want you guys to think about this, that, or the other, and how that might maybe shift over into the category of applied and help us avoid surprise, if you will. And so that allows them to be very aggressive. And I've always had a healthy respect for the DARPA model, right? They move very quickly, right? If something seems like it might be interesting, they're willing to take the risks, put in some resources into it, go through and do due diligence, and then look at it after some period of time and say, hey, we like that, we didn't like that. So then they can accomplish a lot with minimal amount of resources. And they also have, I think, a good model with the management process that they use in terms of DARPA PMs rolling in and off, in and out every like 5 years or something like that. So that keeps the organization vibrant and fresh and moving. So, the stuff that we're trying to champion at LSI definitely falls into the category of low TRL at a minimum. And in some cases, we're very much on the frontiers of science, right? Trying to figure out what's beyond the two standard models of the microscopic and the macroscopic world, right? I mean, that is basic research, right? And so, and it requires people thinking about those types of things to be able to make progress. So,
excellent. Sonny, last week, a lot of activity in the press about mentioning things, warp bubbles and accidental discovery warp bubbles and so forth. Once again, nothing confidential here, but talk a little bit about what you're discovering, what you've discovered, what you haven't discovered yet. I know you haven't found warp speed yet. Scotty, I need warp speed or we'll be dead. But talk a little bit about what this particular news was all about
right. No, that's so the work we're currently doing for DARPA Defense Science Office is we are working on a kind of that frontiers of physics type of mindset, filling in the gap between general relativity and quantum mechanics, if you will. Yep. We're exploring a model we call our dynamic vacuum model. We had done some previous work with DARPA when I was at NASA to develop and explore the model both in the lab and theoretically. In that case, we were studying how it pertains to modeling individual atoms. And so part of what we're doing now with DARPA DSO is we're taking those physics models and we're applying them to some microscopic, nanoscopic structures that we're learning how to make at the same time we're working on physics models, where we can try and predict how we think the quantum vacuum might respond to the presence of these microscopic and nanoscale structures. Now, the specific applications that we're trying to explore may have some implications for modest but persistent amounts of power. There may be the ability to generate a propulsive force, and so maybe it'll have an application as some kind of a space drive or a thruster. There may be some implications for communications and sensor systems. So now, switching gears a little bit, in the process of kind of exploring how the quantum vacuum responds to these structures, that's where the term accidental discovery kind of comes to mind. We were exploring some custom Casimir cavities that we were building that I'm going to use some hand puppets. Hopefully this will communicate well over Zoom. We were exploring some custom Casimir cavities where we have two plates that are very close to one another, and then we have three pillars that are in between those plates. And we were studying how the quantum vacuum responds around where the pillar is in between the two plates. And in the process of looking at like a two-dimensional section cut of this negative vacuum energy density distribution, it was these two lenticular types of regions that had extremely large magnitude negative vacuum energy density. And so based on work I've done previously in the idea of a space war, I was looking at those distributions and saying, that kind of looks like what we might need for the idea of a space war. I wonder if we were to try and be more purposeful about how we structure the topology, could we get this really close? And so we went through the process of modeling a 1 micrometer diameter sphere surrounded by a 4 micrometer diameter cylinder. And in the process of doing that, we were able to show that this very tiny structure will manifest a toroidal ring of negative vacuum energy density that basically matches the requirements for the Alcubierre warp metric. So the Alcubierre warp metric is a metric that's kind of comes out of the formalism of general relativity, and it's a way to kind of capture the idea of being able to go to another star system in say months as opposed to decades. And so when you look at what that specific model requires, it requires this toroidal ring of negative vacuum energy density around the central portion of the spacecraft. And so when we compare those topologies to one another, it was a match, right? And so what we published in our paper that was a little bit in the press in EPJC, we said that we have discovered a nanoscale structure that we can propose to the community that one can make. And if we make it, it's going to cause the quantum vacuum to respond in such a way that it will generate this ring of negative vacuum energy density such that it will manifest a nanoscale warp bubble, not an analog, right? Sure. I use that parlance, real and analog, for the following reason. There's, people do work with things like analogs for black holes, if you will, acoustical black holes, where we study stuff in the lab that has characteristics that kind of look like the math and physics we see with black holes, but with sound waves instead. And so it's not really a black hole; it's just an analog, right? So,
sure.
So that's why I think the specific choice of the word real in the literature, to make sure we're not confusing the physics community with what we're saying. So
sure, absolutely. And it sounds completely fascinating to me. Most of it's over my head, and I apologize for that. But I take taking my hat off to all of you for focusing on this type of research in 2022 as we enter 2022. Take us, if you would. One of the things I always like to go into on shows, especially in some of these domains, which are sort of a little outside of my experience in life sciences, is alternative uses. And in a case, I did this show a few months ago with Dr. David Stout at Booz Allen, who runs their directed energy program. And why was they doing directed energy? Well, laser beams are just cool. And I'm a Star Trek fan, and I like phasers and all sorts of stuff like that. But, I asked a question, what can you do with these things ultimately before we make a spaceship that shoots laser beams? Can we use these laser beams to drill deeper than we've ever drilled before, or do certain things with the industrial processing? Can we make little laser beam guns so you don't have to shoot bullets? So forth. Whatever. I ask all the typical cool.
Because who doesn't want that?
Right? Yeah, who doesn't want that stuff? Anyway, take us just on a little walk for those that are unfamiliar. What potentially could toroidal rings of negative vacuum energy density do before you get the warp drive going? Potentially in the coming years or decades here.
Well, yeah. So, what is there some kind of a roadmap or a progression or crawl, walk, run type of thought process for some of these concepts and ideas, right? And so, in terms of the stuff that we were looking at and we talked about in the EPJC paper, one of the things that we've been thinking about is there's optical implications for this, right? There will be optical properties of those systems. Could you potentially study the impact that those types of structures might have on light? You could view them as like a broadband metamaterial. Oftentimes, metamaterials are kind of constrained to specific frequency bands, if you will, whereas this might be a little bit more broadband metamaterial. Maybe it could have an impact on gases that one might flow through it. Maybe it could change absorption spectrum or something. I don't know. And even going back to some of the stuff I talked about for the custom Casimir cavities, because the physics is all connected, if you will. Some of the stuff we're looking at in the custom Casimir cavities, to me, communications might be a really interesting application long before it ever has some of the space stuff that we'd like to think about. In some of the work that we did for the DARPA work that was funded back when I was at NASA, we studied how the atomic structure of atoms, they're potentially manifestations of acoustic resonances in the quantum vacuum. Longitudinal wave, if you will. I don't mean to say it's something you hear, it's a longitudinal wave resonance around the atom. And so that suggests that the quantum vacuum can manifest and sustain longitudinal waves. And that's a different form of radiation. And so what would that do if you had a transmitter or receiver that could transmit or receive these longitudinal waves? Well, that might be a new form of communication that you could equip cell phones with, for example. And maybe you'd have a cell phone that when you get into an elevator and the door closes, you don't lose a signal, right? Nice. The longitudinal waves would not be bothered by the fact that there's this metal enclosure around. Or, what if you were in a car in the LA area or something? So all these little hills and valleys. And when you go down into a valley, maybe ordinarily you might have some issues with cell phone coverage, but with a system that used longitudinal waves to transmit back and forth, it could go through large swaths of dense material, and the signals would not be attenuated. So there could be some communication implications long before the space stuff that we think about. Longitudinal waves as a sensor system, right? It'll be able to see things that we currently cannot see with electromagnetic radiation, whether it's RF, X-rays, anything that falls in that category. Longitudinal waves will see things that transverse electromagnetic waves will not be able to see. So who knows what that might do for us in terms of, can we see things in the human body in a different way that might be useful to us and for any myriad of purposes, primarily probably related to health. Maybe there could be lots of things where that would be brought to bear and help us long before we would really get it to a point that we might use it in space. So there might be a lot of neat waypoints along the way in the process of trying to mature and explore the idea. And in a lot of cases, those waypoints they'll benefit us in the here and now. Yep. Right. So I guess going back to the accidental discovery, even right when we were just doing the work for DARPA DSO, we've accidentally discovered this connection with the idea of the space program. So anyway.
Excellent. Yeah, I really enjoy hearing about the alternative, the short-term possibilities. But then, yeah, I mean, I was joking offline with you that elevator phone that's worth trillions of dollars, I think, right away. So that's
people will put that to use right away, right?
Exactly. But that being said, so you have your Ph.D. in physics. Obviously, we need. You're a young guy. I'm a young guy. But time's moving on. We need this. But you're setting things up for all generations that come after you, because this is there's things that work today. There's things that are going to be working 20 years from now based on this type of research. Talk about the next generation a little bit, and what if tomorrow $50 trillion materialized in Limitless Space Institute's bank account, you can do all the research you want. What are you looking for in terms of the next generation of physicists and engineers and so forth to come along? What will your team look like that works on sort of the translation of these projects in the next decade or two? Inspire that next generation of folks that you want to get into STEM, that are thinking of getting into investment banking instead right now, or law.
Yeah. Right. I think it's important for us to work together in the here and now, right? There's value in being a member of a team, and where you have multiple perspectives, you tend to be more capable than an individual might be. So there's value in working together in the here and now. But I think it's also important, to remember we have to be able to work together, across generations, if you will. I think there's a lot of importance in that. And I'll come back to, you were talking about specific numbers of size and scale, but there's a point I want to highlight here in terms of the value proposition moving forward in terms of us doing things together. I think we need to remember it's really important to do things together over time. If you think about some of the things we've accomplished in the past with that type of a mindset, think about so in this past summer, I taught some classes at the International Space University in Strasbourg, in France. And during some of the off days, got a chance to go into Strasbourg and go tour the Strasbourg Cathedral. And so the Strasbourg Cathedral, they started building that thing in like 1100 AD. Mm-hmm. And they did not finish that until the 1700s. So all that to say, I mean, the people that built the basement, I mean, they never saw the rest of the cathedral get built, but they knew they had to do their part building the foundation so that the next generation could come along and they could build the walls. And the next generation could come along and maybe they could build the gussets and so forth until 700 years goes by. And then this beautiful thing is there in Strasbourg. And so I think in a day and age where we get a little irritated when we text somebody and they don't text us back in 5 minutes, we need to learn there's a lot of value in that type of mindset and philosophy. And so, I think one of the things I really hope to see is inspire and educate the next generation that's this continuing thing that we continue to try and work together both in the here and now and across generations to accomplish these things. And I have no idea when and if these types of things would become possible, but I know what I need to be doing now. Because that's one of the questions, the most common questions I get is, hey, when are we going to have warp drive? I don't know, but I know what I need to be doing right now. There's a specific work that we can be doing in the lab right now. Yep. And so, it's to me, it's like if this stuff really stirs your soul and gets you excited, it's a multidisciplinary problem. There's lots of aspects and areas of exploration. It's kind of a all hands on deck thing too, right? This is a monumental problem and a monumental challenge. And the cool thing is, in the process of trying to reduce some of these grand visions to reality, I mean, we're going to end up with power systems that we probably couldn't even imagine today that will obviously improve the quality of life here on the planet. We'll learn how to be more effective at, not generating waste, right? Trying to do a better job of taking care of the environment. And, one of the things I always like to think about is the whole concept of scarcity. We have an entire solar system full of stuff, resources, and so forth. And having a solar system-wide community and culture, that would potentially change the very definition of scarcity for us as a species as well, right? So I think it's one of those things that in the process of trying to chase these amazing hopes and dreams and aspirations, they could really make life better for us here on Earth, right? I think there's no question that that would be an outcome of pursuit of these types of things. So all hands on deck, come join us. We need help, right? So
absolutely. And if I had the skills, I'd come join you. right. So continuing along that line with the $50 trillion you have in the bank, if the warp speed was to miraculously materialize in 2026 or whenever, with the money we give you, where does Dr. Harold Sonny White want to? If I could send you anywhere in the cosmos today to check things out, you'll be safe and everything with all the right bells and whistles associated with this unique spacecraft. But where do you want to explore in the cosmos? Just the rings of Saturn, Andromeda. Where do you want to go? The Oort cloud.
Right. Yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting stuff that's coming out of exoplanets. Right. Think about all the stuff that we've been able to discover. A whole bunch of stars in proximity to our star have all kinds of planets around them. A number of those are located in regions that we would kind of consider habitable, if you will. I think there's like an actual quotient that they use to identify those. But there's a number of planets that are around stars. And even I think Proxima Centauri B is an exoplanet that's potentially in a habitable zone around Proxima Centauri. I think there's some speculation that I don't know if it's Alpha Cent A or Alpha Cent B, has an exoplanet that's potentially in a habitable zone, I would speculate they'll probably eventually find lots of these stars all have planets in the habitable zone. So there's probably no shortage of interesting places to go see if we had the capability to go there in person, if you will. In terms of, I think you had maybe asked this in an earlier question, where would I like to see resources put in terms of different areas for research? And I'll go back to the kind of that the 3 swim lane view that I gave you on ways to try and enable the ability to send human beings to the outer solar system and beyond. If you look at our portfolio now, it kind of matches that as well. We're putting resources in nuclear electric propulsion. We have a university partnership with Texas A&M. We're funding them to do a very detailed paper design on a micronuclear reactor that generates 1 megawatt electric of power. We're funding a number of researchers that are working in that fusion propulsion range. And then we have a number of folks that are also working in that, I call it the breakthrough category, the frontiers of physics. So in my mind, I think in terms of bringing resources to bear, if we had even more resources, we would continue to do the same thing we're doing today. We put if you think of it like as a portfolio, if you will, we're putting resources in each of those categories, if you will. It's kind of a balanced portfolio, maybe a little bit more towards the fusion and breakthrough, because there are already municipal government organizations that are bringing money to bear for the nuclear reactor domain, but the fusion and breakthrough are the area where there's probably the greatest need. And so that's where, if we had increased revenue from multiple sources, let's say it's like a public-private partnership, for example, maybe we have some opportunity in the future where we can partner together and try and champion some work in this area. And then it would be something where we would try and continue to augment the resources that we're putting into those specific research categories.
Got it. Well, I have to say, I hope that your research budget becomes limitless, because I mean, the stuff you're working on is just so impressive, and the fact that not only you work on it, but you put together the team to bring these ideas to bear. I think it's we need more and more of this in today's world, on all fronts, whether they be space tech, biotech, environmental tech, what have you. So I mean, I take my hat off to you for everything that you're trying to achieve there. Any final messages for the audience? Anything that I didn't touch on, Sonny, that you wanted to mention? Please, give you the floor on the way out.
I think in terms of anything that's in the press, I think they've tried to do a pretty good job of pointing to some of our published papers. Number one, so and we try anything that we publish, we try to do as open source to make sure people can get directly to the information themselves and explore it and think about it. I do want to maybe highlight one more thing.
Sure.
As part of our Interstellar Initiative grants, the work we're doing there, we conducted those research grants where we recorded the kickoff meeting, the midterm meeting, and the final meeting through a Zoom webinar, and we broadcast that so everybody could watch it. Whether they watch it through the Zoom webinar or through our YouTube channel, and then we put the recording proceedings onto our YouTube channel. So if anyone wants to go look at the things that we funded under Interstellar Initiative grants, you can Google Limitless Space YouTube. That'll take you to our YouTube channel, and you can find all those proceedings. The recordings are bookmarked with chapters for the different investigators and their presentations. And so, even though it might be like an 8-hour-long video, you can still just look at whichever segment you want as you need to. So lots of good material already out there. We're going to continue to grow it over the coming years. And so be looking for the Interstellar Initiative grants. The second biennial cycle, we'll be putting something out probably the May timeframe. Awesome.
And we will put links to all of that in the bio to the show when it goes live. So, really great. For everybody that's going to be listening to this particular episode across the podcast networks or watching on the YouTube channel, you've been listening to Dr. Harold Sonny White Director, Advanced Research and Development, Limitless Space Institute down in Houston, Texas. Sonny, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to come educate us on these topics. Thanks for everything that you're doing there and continue to do. And as we say on this show, thanks for helping to make tomorrow a better place. Really fascinating program, and I wish you the best with it.
Okay. Thank you, Ira. I appreciate it. Godspeed.
Godspeed.